Welcome to Musings from the Cyber Trench, the podcast that goes beyond surface-level talk to uncover the real challenges and breakthroughs in public sector cybersecurity. Each episode features fearless leaders and visionary experts who are reshaping security strategies in some of the most complex environments. This is a space for honest conversations, fresh perspectives, and practical insights designed to empower and inspire. Get ready to rethink what's possible and join a community committed to making cybersecurity stronger, smarter, and more resilient. Here's your host, Vishal Masi.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Musings from the Cyber Trench. Today we are going to talk about making security controls more human. We keep adding these controls, but we are still getting breached. Because having controls doesn't mean that you have the basics right. We all know compliance does not equate security. So what are we doing wrong? My guest today is especially equipped to shed some light on that. He's currently serving as the CTO of Transbridge, a fintech startup that is focused on banking and cyber compliance. He has 2 decades of experience in IT, is a coding geek, an author, a husband, and a father to some amazing people who are all huge influences on his life. In his spare time, he enjoys playing a couple of instruments and drawing, and as well as participating in a few mentorship programs. With that, please meet my guest, Morgan Reed. Welcome to the musings from the Cyber Trench, Morgan.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Vishal.
Absolutely. So let's talk about security controls. So we keep adding these security controls. The attackers still succeed in using basic human tactics. So from your perspective, what are we getting fundamentally wrong?
Well, I mean, a couple of things, and I know that we're going to talk about logical implementation and architecture and other deeper things later on in this program. But the biggest thing is just education, basic understanding, and really kind of level setting with people. It's easy from my perspective to say, oh, God, roll my eyes. How could this person do something so silly or dumb or asinine or whatever, right? But it's the notion of I see this literally every day, whereas a lot of other people have no idea.
Understood. Okay. So do you think we should our security should the way we handle security, the way we approach security should consider the or it should compensate for the human behavior patterns that we keep seeing?
I think it should definitely compensate for human behavior patterns. I also think we have to take into account things like role and overall duties with people. It's very easy to. There are a lot of, for example, in the compliance end, there are a whole lot of kits that you could buy, which are great. Like from my perspective, it's okay. This ticks all the boxes, and here's my overall strategy. Kind of just add water or whatever, right? And here's our phishing email test. Here's our this. Here's our that. Sometimes there will be people within your role or within your company that might have a role where that phishing test that we're using might not even be all that appropriate. So it can easily, that could easily set someone up for failure. And then of course that makes your metrics look bad. And then there's all sorts of discussions that happen internally. Why isn't this person getting it? Blah, blah, blah. And that's not really necessary. There are ways around that.
That's a good point, because what you're basically saying is that we have to customize security based on the user's context. or make security more context aware. So in the industry right now, we only have, as far as I know, two sets of user context that we are using in security. One is privileged accounts, and the second is not. So we don't really have that level of contextual customization based on the user role. You see, with like in the future, with the help of AI, cybersecurity tools, and vendors being able to customize security based on the user's role.
Absolutely. And I think that's an area that some companies I think understand to a certain degree that it might already be leaning that way, or they're prepping, for it to go that way in the future. Anybody who's ever set up, for example, just to pull randomly here, a Microsoft email tenant, right? Whatever flavor or variation it is, knows that there are so many ridiculous amounts of different settings, and you have, it seems like 100 different types of admins, etc. And realistically, a lot of that can go towards the understanding that, hey, here in at all these different levels, you have different levels of access, different things that will be addressed. Somebody who is, let's just say, because I come from fintech, somebody who's working as a financial analyst and doing kind of privileged account setups and client, sort of backdoor business and transfer, acting as kind of a designated agent to deal with these sort of everyday transactions, et cetera, isn't going to need to, is going to have a different level and a higher level of access and platform exposure, et cetera, than somebody who's, say, an exec admin, or somebody who's part of your building maintenance staff or whatever. And to treat them absolutely the same is really just not only a folly, but it's potentially asking for some unnecessary side effects.
So, like, see, attribute-based access control, role-based access control is not new. It's been there for a long time. But bringing that into mainstream, just like outside of just access control, like make it part of your security operational framework in like day-to-day life. It's not there yet, right? So you think is that something that we should be moving towards, or taking more of the burden of security away from the user and putting more on the system side where it is more context aware?
Absolutely. And I think that we're seeing that individually a lot. As you said, RBAC has been the standard for a whole bunch of platforms for forever. But I think that you're going to probably see some more push towards some unification of standards across multiple platforms in the future.
Coming back to security controls, like what security controls do you see which users mostly work around, and why?
I'd say that the biggest pushback and complaint that we oftentimes see is for different types of MFA, and in some cases understandable. I'll tell a very quick kind of abstract version of a story that I can kind of make sure that NDAs don't bite me. I had I was at a previous firm. I was the CTO of another financial firm, some half fintech, half service oriented, and the biggest complaint that we got from a lot of the staff was that the MFA procedures and sidecars were really, really difficult for them to navigate, because they felt that the timeout was too quick. And we kind of, at first initially, myself and a couple of my senior staff kind of suppressed our eye rolls, our whatever reactions. But one of the things that we noticed was that when I made it a habit, I should say, in preface here, to try to always spend at least a little bit of time sort of side by siding with a person from an individual team whenever I'm new to a company. So when I did that with a particular team that was complaining the hardest, one of the things I noticed was that they were doing a whole lot of multitasking. So yeah, it was very easy for them to lose track of getting a hold of an MFA code, a one-time password, whatever. When the timeout speed was 30 seconds, they're answering multiple Slack channels, they're going back and forth on various time sensitive issues, and so for them a little more difficult. Our solution to that, in conjunction with a few other problems that presented where it just kind of converged perfectly, was to bring in a passwordless auth system that would use fingerprints. So, and kind of going hand in hand with like Windows Hello with Macs, etc. So, it is, again, meeting people where they are, right?
Yeah, and within our company also, like we have like internally and for our clients, like we have had the same issue. Multi-factor auth, when you're doing it like 10 times an hour, it becomes tiring. Like so we have been using pass keys to, I would say, much of our delight and also the customers, because it's like so much easier. We still use say like the time based OTP, but that's always option 2. Default, we have been promoting and pushing passkey. So I totally agree with you. So besides MFA, like anything else that you see people circumventing?
So I have had some interesting back and forth discussions and pushback again with instituting NIST. And one of the biggest, and of course, especially in certain compliance heavy industries, mine definitely needs that, right? It's almost kind of a given that we're going to use something like NIST or COVID or, one of the other similar frameworks, right? One of the issues is that if you don't create the policies with a little bit of foresight, you can very, very easily have a scenario of extremes where it's either way too open or it's way too locked down. And we thankfully never deployed this, but in one particular past engagement, we had a contractor we brought in to help with the specialization, and he caught a potential mistake where, say for example, all USB connections would be shut down, not just thumb drives or whatever, which could be understandable, but even
A mouse, yeah, camera, whatever.
yeah, and we would most definitely have gotten major pushback. We did get some pushback even with some of the basics like thumb drives, etc. And then having to figure out how to get around that, teach people to, I should say, to circumvent properly through the right channels. Things like our approved cloud storage, and making sure that files that go through that are properly vetted, scanned, checked, etc., according to all of our internal qualifications. But that's one thing where it's sort of interesting to just be in the middle of something and have a queue of people lining up outside your office saying, well, what do you mean? I've done this before. I've been here at this company for 6 years. And, of course, the implication is, dude, you've been here for 3 months. And what are you doing? I'm doing what I was hired to do here, which is to plug a giant hole,
That's funny. One of my pet peeves, I've seen is, and it's mostly driven by compliance frameworks, that ask you to reset passwords every 30 days. Like we know, like if you are using multi-factor auth or you using passwordless auth, with like we have password dictionary with around 10 billion passwords. So there's a pretty high chance that whatever you have used is there somewhere. So like, what do you say to that? Like, how do you convince companies to not forcing people to do password resets?
My general response to that question has always been things along a response along the lines of, hey, just so you know, the most security minded banks, the Chases, the American Expresses, etc., only require somebody to change their password every 90 days. and even they realize that it might be a little bit excessive. Yeah, there are plenty of other considerations when we're using, both MFA and passwordless the additions, additional trust pieces, etc., that make that a lot more secure. And I also generally point, certain size businesses also to password generators if they're really concerned about that and don't want to go that far.
Yep, that's smart. Yeah. So let's shift gears a bit. Okay, so you work on scheduling tools for, like, you have developed scheduling tools for neurodivergent individuals. What has taught you about designing systems people can actually use?
I think the biggest thing is that I want systems to be not necessarily self-explanatory, although there's an old line about UX UI is like a joke. If you've got to explain it, it's not good. Um, but I want people to be able to navigate a system without an excess of frustration, research needed, problems. Um, One of the consistent things that happens for a lot of platforms, and I'm somebody who has spent a lifetime inside some cloud systems like Salesforce and SAP and whatever, right? And this is not to throw stones at those platforms, certainly not. But what typically happens, right, is the platform comes out. Everybody loves it because it replaces something unwieldy and silly before, and so it becomes more adopted. And as it gets more widely adopted, then integrations and new features and new screens and new et cetera comes out, right? And so you end up with this sort of not necessarily bolted on, but ever evolving thing where it's sort of a situation where nobody can know it all. And even the people who know the most know that much because they've spent years inside that platform and are very focused, hyper fixated on knowing the ins and outs as much as possible. For the end user, that's not the case. If you throw somebody, again, to go to my industry, you throw somebody who is a financial analyst, a stock analyst, whatever, into a cloud platform. They're there to do their job. They are there to run through their functions on specific customer and account pieces. They're there to analyze movement, to approve or deny various jobs, triggers, functions, whatever that are coming through. They don't care how it works behind the scenes. They just want to be able to more or less easily discern it. And the longer that you have somebody training on a platform, the more likely they are to A, not absorb it all, and B, tune out.
That's a good point. I was just thinking of Steve Jobs, on how his focus was on making things simple. So from the security, like, do you think security teams, at least like the bigger team, should have at least one person from who has some kind of experience or skills in on the UI UX side of things?
I generally do. At my current company, we do.
Okay, good, good. So so you came to that particular decision based on what you saw in the market, right?
I joined this company because the mission itself intrigued me. There's a whole other kind of story behind the personal level of how I'm joined. That's completely different. But from the professional level, it's I'm a compliance geek, and my general focus has always been the notion of how do I keep you out of trouble, because it's much easier to keep you out of it than get you out of it when you're in it.
Yeah, like they say, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. Sorry, no.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about again, like coming back to making security more human. Like, how would you define that to say a fellow CISO?
I'd say the biggest thing is that you have to have at least a little bit of perspective on the roles you serve. There's a lot that because I came up through uh, the project management side, and of course in the agile world, you know, at back in the day and still currently, um, they emphasize the phrase servant leadership a lot. And so there are a lot of little things that I always try to do for my teams just to remind them, hey, I'm the person here. Granted, I'm setting the standards and I'm the one who will sometimes give the arbitrary last call and say, no, we're not going to take that architectural direction, or we're not going to take that up, or we're not going to do that, or we are going to do this before that, whatever. Uh, but more than anything, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to impress upon the team that I am here to be their support and their biggest cheerleader. And it goes beyond that by far. So it's things like whenever like I can tell you, uh, joining this latest org, one of the first things I did was literally within the first few days, not only did I get one-on-one time with everybody on my team, but I got it from the major representatives of every other team. I asked them what was going on in their world, what's currently vexing them, what's their biggest problem, what's their biggest issue, how can we, you know, give you some abilities to do your job better. How could we refine your tools? How could we reduce your context switching? How can we, on and on, right? All of these things. And it's little things like, somebody saying, oh, well, we have our CRM, but we actually have two CRMs and and we've been trying to migrate out of this old legacy one, but we've got, it's a big pain in the butt and we've got, this issue. And by the way, I'm also using this tool for project management, but nothing reflects and I'm copying and pasting and screwing things up all the time. And, so to me, I hear that and I hear, all right, migration, shutting down legacy systems that are now, no longer needed and will be possibly vulnerable. I hear, how can we engage some connection tools, whether it's out of the box thing, like a Zapier, or alternately, some AI is big on everybody's radar right now, obviously, including mine, especially. Love it. So model context protocol type of stuff, connectors. And then more than anything, how do I make sure all of those requests coming into it are properly vetted and locked down as need be?
You mentioned model context protocols, and that's a nice uh, tangent to our conversation. How do you think using a, agentic AI and MCPs can help us make security more human?
I think one of the biggest things is that the I should back up here real quick. The areas I've been looking at the most with agentic AI has been realistically uh connection, like I said, between different platforms to kind of reduce the context switching. Now, the other side of that is that from an internal side, it's allowing, myself and my team to be more productive, not just because we're running some Claude code agents here and there or whatever, and having it do a few different automated testing functions, but it's also allowing us to do a lot more comprehensive look at things like port access, right? API limits and monitoring our API usage. There are a lot of areas with like some of the trust platforms where it is very simple for the right person to sort of piggyback on legitimate calls and exploit those. And the only way you're going to catch those is if you're either A, monitoring so hard that that nothing errant can come through, or B, in the case of most companies that don't have the resources of a Chase or a Toyota or whoever it may be, right? It's just keeping an eye on traffic patterns. And this is one of the things that's really, I think, been revolutionary for me and my teams, is just the idea of, uh, you know, we have our expected traffic and we line up where the actual traffic comes from and what it looks like.
I think around, if I'm not wrong, I think 40 or 50% of the current web traffic is all bots.
I would be surprised if it was that low.
Yeah. So if you think about that, just the scale of tracking traffic pattern is going to be uh, huge, right? So how would a small company tackle that?
There are a few different ways, um, and beyond just the monitoring ends that I already mentioned. Um, I think we need to be very diligent on our overall security keys, our trust policies and patterns that we have set up. Um, we, we need some very clear pipelines. For on the development side, one of my first asks out of any newer team is, what does our our continuous deployment pipeline look like, right? And what are the controls around it? Because there have been, it's one of those things where, uh, again, things that, there are things that I shouldn't talk about on a public forum, but I do know, and I think a lot, it's sort of a, I say, it's a less acknowledged secret that some of the most interesting and dangerous and sophisticated attacks that have come around have been from a particular, collective or nation state actor that figured out how to spoof a legitimate source, you know. And so we may have some fundamental elementary markers in for, an API call for, whatever particular piece of productivity or accounting software or whatever that's going to come through this whitelisted IP, etc. But we also need to go a little further on that level of uh, overall holistic security, so that something can't just give us half the credentials that we should ideally be employing and then come through the door. We need a very, very locked down process.
That to me sounds more like what, uh, like the concept of zero trust, like deny by default, right? So that's something that we have been working a lot on lately. One thing that we are seeing a gap, because like being on the IAM side, there's still a lot of to a lot to be done in terms of just in time provisioning. You know, people get access and they keep the access. But many products like don't really have a solution in terms of like they don't really support the model uh, of just in time provisioning to get access only for that particular transaction. So what we have been doing is like trying to put those controls at the network security layer. Just block the access till the person needs it, because the application doesn't support that yet. So in your experience, like what typical patterns you have seen when the management tries to push down deny by default model?
These typical patterns are pushback from certain sections or factions within the business that will be upset that something that they've taken for granted, that uh, a security hole that should not have been there, right? Because I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of work in the enterprise side, but I've also done a whole lot of work within maturing startups where they kind of, you come in and they go, okay, well, we don't even know how to get our arms around this. We've been, you know, outsourcing a good portion of this, and we've got, this team of of 8 guys over here and a couple of people offshore, but we don't know what we don't know. Fantastic. I love that scenario. It's always a little interesting, and at times it's a little nerve-wracking, but I still love it because there's so much that can be done. Um, but then what you inevitably have, as I was trying to say here initially, um, is people who come back to you and say, well, I never had to do X before. I never had to,
So common. Yeah.
I enter a additional, confirmation for my access to access sensitive information, right? I'm used to the PII just being right up there for all of my accounts. And this is annoying. And you're, in the back of your mind, of course, you're thinking it's 2 clicks. It's your fingerprint on a reader. It's, whatever. It's not that hard. But to them, it represents change, and that change can at times be threatening or frightening to people. And so there's this sort of weird gray area where we're going between, bolting on new security to an old system, or behind the scenes, we're going to a migration away from, some older security, right? Like you mentioned Auth0, right? And that's something I've been doing a lot of work with over the years, including recently. And so now people are upset that um, they get a confirmation request from the system because behind the scenes it's refreshing a token and saying, okay, well, this token is more than whatever policy period time old, and I need to refresh that. Cool. But now they're saying, oh, well, now I gotta refresh things. Oh my gosh. um, we deal with a lot of people who, and I've done, in this scenario all of my career, and I can tell you some interesting little side stories about it. But we deal with people who sometimes are just fine technology wise, and others where they're just really, really set in their ways, right? And they're really resistant, and they don't want to do X. Whether X is, I don't want to, have more than one, program for this. I don't want to look at this. I don't want to, put in passwords ever. Okay. But we still have to find a way to work with them and make it palatable. Not that all of the onus is on us, but we have to make an attempt to beat them where they are.
Yeah, I have seen, like, I have worked at a few Fortune 500 companies, and we have had to put in security exceptions for the C-suite because they didn't really like a particular control. So I was thinking, like, it should start from the top. Like, they are the ones who should be pushing it instead of like asking just like uh, don't deploy it for me. Have you seen that too?
Quite a bit. I have dealt with a couple of senior and C-suite people over the years who were as resistant as possible. Um, I I could tell this story because it's been many years. The very beginning of my career, I was working with a firm that did legal software support, and so they're and very intense systems, very heavily SQL based, and everything that they're we were doing all of the automated testing, security, and improvements on my team, but we would hear all of these conversations coming from the support desk routinely, and then they would come over to us and download customer requests or whatever, or weird questions that they just had no clue on. And you would hear somebody talking to someone, or you'd be brought into a call occasionally, and it would be anywhere from okay, here's a government entity, and they're totally up on top of things, and they've got people in the house who are saying, okay, well, how do I jibe the SQL permission structure and issues here? What's the query supposed to look like? What's the call supposed to look like? And then you have on the other side, people that are from really large law firms where, there's a billboard up in multiple cities and whatever, and the CEO literally is yelling in the background because he never saw that email of the emails that his secretary printed off for him. And so he didn't know that we had a change happening. And you kind of you take a step back and go, how the temptation is to go, how is it you're so adept in this area and yet so short here, right? It's like you think of, you know, if if I guess Michael Jordan couldn't run a 40-yard dash fast, right? But could do everything else.
That's funny. So, Morgan, how did you start in cybersecurity?
Well, I started up through app development. I was in the beginning of my career. Very, very first things I did in my career were technical writing and website development work, and I was in the automated testing side of QA, and just watching continuously all the lockdown that we had to do for every platform. It kind of fascinated me. I'm you know I am, like I said, I'm a compliance geek, and I come from, a lot of engineers and, legally minded people and whatever. I'm, the person who likes to, watch Law and Order and, say, oh yeah, that's right. No, that's not, that's not a thing in, maybe that's a thing in New York, but not here, and, so it appealed to me because, again, I like making sure that that we have the protection we need, and working, having sort of gotten into fintech a lot over the years. There's always this you know this emphasis on not just protection, but all sorts of policy and defining, kind of level set rules that we need. One of the biggest things is, just overall, you know, policy execution, uh, it, classification, levels of access and privilege, like you were talking about earlier, retention policies, and all of these, as you know, there have been traditionally so many areas where this was back in the past, and not that long ago, like in the beginning of my career, where all of this was handled manually, right? It's literally somebody going into a Microsoft panel and saying, yeah, Vishal should have admin access, but um, Jeff should not, and Kishore should, and etc., right? And then, you know people going through document storage or whatever it may be and saying, okay, well, these have manually hit the policy, and realizing that this is just levels of not just busy work, but things that humans are inclined to mess up. We are not perfect, right? We're going to inevitably, when dealing with things like platform connection, or or document retention, or policy, or whatever, we're going to make mistakes. And how do you shore that up? Because in a lot of circumstances, these are things that cost time, they cost money, they cost trust with clients, with vendors, etc. It's the type of stuff that it makes or breaks your reputation, and that's really what I love about that challenge.
I see manual audits as a way uh, to crush the morale of the people who are actually have to do it. It's like it's a lot of work which can be automated. And like I usually hate like theoretical stuff. I'm more of like getting my hands dirty and like, getting work done. So when I see people, like this manually doing audit like line by line, for the access. I've seen companies still do it manually because they want to have that like paper trail, and it's painful to watch.
Absolutely.
So, Morgan, let's shift gears a bit now. So, you have done app development. You are also a compliance geek, and you also have a few other side projects that you are actually working on. What work feels most meaningful to you right now?
So, from the professional level, it is definitely some of the compliance end of things that I've been working on. I've got a couple of in addition to my day job, there's a couple of side applications that myself and a few friends we've been supporting and working on. Uh, some data integrity pieces that are kind of niche stuff that scrubs data and makes sure that it matches up properly. And we also do a outsourced QA service for a few small companies. And so those are things that I like wrapping my head around, because again they kind of provide that protection and that insurance that you need. The neurodivergence application that you were mentioning, a piece, that one is more of a personal passion project, um, mostly because I have a neurodivergent child, and also my sister is actually currently right now working on her doctorate in early childhood education, specifically working with neurodivergent and autistic children.
Wow. Okay. I want to ask you like uh, the story behind it, but you already shared that. So, like, what lessons have you learned from there? That you have been using in your uh, other projects.
I'd say the biggest one is just information delivery management and style. Um, the biggest thing that I took out of that app from how it was created is being able to customize you know views and dashboard creation for people, because while I think everybody has there's a sudden sort of trend that's been coming up where there's a lot of course, because we're automating everything, we're using agentic controls and agents for everything now. Um, there are a lot of startups I've seen lately, and I deal with a lot of startups locally because I do some mentorship, and I'm involved in a couple of local community things here in Phoenix, like Arizona Nerd Network and a couple of things like that, where it's literally just hey, let's come together, once a month, let's have some pizza, let's chat about what we got going on, and connect with people, get some feedback, some networking, whatever in. But like I noticed that there is a huge trend right now towards startups that are just pushing to get out there because they want to, get out there and get some positive cash flow. And they sort of grab whatever AI tool that's out there, and they do a quick, MVP of their product. And it just has a very fixed, not just look, but feel, right? They're, they are we know from experience, but this takes a little bit of time for some people to learn from the more visceral level, if you will, that AI is only as good as what you input, right? You can't just give it just general instructions and say, "Oh, hey, here, make me a thing," right? Um, you if you say, "Make me a cool app," and I've literally done this experiment just for the hell of it. Um, it'll give you a weather app. You know, I I don't a weather app is something that any computer science student in their usually their first, if not their second year, can do in their sleep. You know, and so the onus is on the maker is to be conscientious of not just how it looks, but how it responds, right? What are the differentiations uh, for various elements within the app? And by that, I mean, how does there's a certain draw for the eye whenever you're using an app, you're using, whether it's a web app or a mobile app, there's a certain draw that the eye will follow according to how your design flows. So what are your things like your gradients look like? What are your button highlights, your menus, your drop downs, your overall different panels look like? How do they differentiate? A lot of these sort of quick designs that people are putting out, uh, they miss what's good about more sophisticated designs. One of the first things I tell any founder, regardless of what they're doing, or any newish UX person who's getting into their field, is go look at Mobbin, for example. Is a perfect start for you, because Mobbin, for those unfamiliar, collects all sorts of different UX UI designs from the top companies in various areas, right? And so what it if you look at that, and you can create an account on it for free, right? You get an idea of not just and you take in several different designs. Like, don't just look at a couple. You get an idea suddenly of why, say, Uber is as successful as it is, or why, whatever app is successful as it is, because you see design components and repetition that are carried across multiple different apps from places that have actually studied this. And so the biggest thing is to be able to allow people to actually navigate your app, a sort of a bit of confusion, maybe panic, whatever. The solution everybody always comes to is the long way around, which is, I'm going to give it dark and light mode and this and that. I'm going to make every button and element movable and resizable and etc. And all of that is great stuff. I'm not arguing with that notion, but it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of code. And if you're just trying to get up and running, what you don't want is, you don't want something that looks and behaves so, I won't say badly, but so mediocrely that people are not happy about using it. And that's the number one thing I hear out of a lot of reaction from startups, from people, is, I like the idea, I like the function, but your app sucks. The reason they're saying your app sucks isn't because of what it does. If they like the function, they like the app. They just don't like the skin. They don't like the interface. They don't feel like they know what they're doing.
Interesting. You mentioned mentorship. How did you get into that?
More or less accidentally. I had a nephew who had gone through like a bit of a interesting run of life, where a few negative things happened for him, including his mother dying. And he was sort of trying to figure out what to do with his life. He'd been in the military, he came back, and after all of that, and was, you know, figuring out something. And my remarks to him were, hey, you could look at the software world, you could look at at IT, at the cybersecurity world, all these different areas. There's tons of opportunity. The jobs are plentiful. We need good people. You're smart enough. And so he took that seriously, and he used, some resources available to him, and ended up, getting a degree pretty quickly, associates. And when he did it, he ended up convincing a few of his friends to come along in tow. And I ended up sort of with a gaggle of kids that I adopted, if you will. Um, and then that sort of grew, and so it became, I went to their one of their programs and spoke, and then I got involved in some of the startup scene around here in the area, and a few other communities. And I've I've long had a philosophy that, I will give out my number to just about anybody who asks for it, and that information in and of itself is free, and I'm more than happy to share information.
That's very noble. Thank you for that. So niche applications, passion projects, mentorship, compliance. It's a lot. Besides that, what do you do outside work that helps you recharge? I know it's a lot.
A number of things. Yeah, as you mentioned at the beginning, I do a couple of odd artistic things. That that's sketched for a long time. I, you know, you can't see it, but above me here is a guitar hanging up, which I play not great, but I play it. Um, and I'm a big believer in meditation and in trying to live relatively decently. My diet doesn't always reflect that, but I am happy to say that I do, I walk dogs every day, and try to keep somewhat active, and just try to make sure that I spend a good amount of time unplugged from the screen. It's easier said than done sometimes, because every IT pro knows that there's the notion of you push off from your laptop and you go, oh, thank God, I'm done with this day. And then the first thing you do is you pick up your phone and you start scrolling on that and go, oh, well, wait a minute.
Yep, I forgot that. Yeah, yep, happens to me all the time. So you mentioned like you play a few musical instruments. One is the guitar. What else do you play?
Trumpet.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, and I started actually started playing that when I was in junior high. Uh, my m- my I have a few musically inclined people in my family. My father nowadays runs a technical PR company where they do a lot of videos and like technical documentation and whatever for instrument manufacturers. But he was a musician back in the day, and nothing notable, but it's that whole 6 degrees of separation that we have.
That's nice. Did your children also follow in your footsteps in terms of music?
I actually, yes, I have one daughter who graduated from Carnegie Mellon with a degree in operatic performance. Uh, Although now she's in grad school to become a therapist.
Okay, that's pretty neat though. Yeah. Wow. So if you weren't not doing security or tech, what would you be doing instead?
A few different things come to mind. I mean, teaching kind of goes in line with the mentorship, and that's probably something I would consider as like a semi-retirement thing. My wife has always joked around that we would start a dog rescue. So because it seems like we unwillingly adopt dogs even when we don't want to. We've got two right now, which is low for us.
Yeah, two is not bad. Yeah. What is the max that you had at a time?
Four.
Four. Okay. My uh, elder sister, she likes dogs. She's like also like I think she also had that four dogs maximum at a time. Yeah, she loves dogs too. It's a lot. It's, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it really is.
So, Morgan, where can our listeners follow your work or learn more about the projects that you just mentioned?
I'm on LinkedIn, of course. I'm reasonably diligent about putting out content on there. I write on Medium, and most everything I write on there is not paywalled, and because I do write on various subjects, including obviously AI is a big one right now, and also working on a slow satirical book on called I'll be politically correct here, called How to F Your Startup, which the
Okay.
came about due to some great discussions with some friends many moons ago.
I am going to look it up right now.
Yeah, there's only about right now. I think there's about 4 chapters up on it on my Medium, and then I've got a personal website which is morganKreed.com, and doing some updates on that right now too. So, yeah.
Okay, you will have to send me the link because when I looked it up, it's not showing up on the first page. So yeah, if you can share the link, I would love to add it to the video description also.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I like the name. Okay. So this was really great, Morgan. I am sure our listeners will love learning about the compliance, making security more human, and how your experience have helped you make security more human. That's the most important thing. Like our experiences make who we are.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure, Morgan, and I hope to stay in touch. And I look forward to the link for your book. Right?
All right. Thank you.
Well, this brings us to an end of another episode of Musings from the Cyber Trench. I'll see you on the next one.
Musings from the Cyber Trench podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.